Georgia's 2026 wide-open governor's race took on a new dimension this past week. This is Political Update here on Atlanta News First and AtlantaNewsFirst.com. I'm Tim Darnell, joined as always by my friend and colleague Rick Fulvald. Rick, we are talking about former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, who after weeks after she originally hinted at a potential Georgia gubernatorial run, she made it official this past week. Your thoughts? We were kind of expecting it. She, as I mentioned at the top, she hinted at this on social media some weeks ago, made it official last week. Your input and your observations, please.
Well, you're right. Not really surprising. It's sort of one of the worst kept secrets in Georgia politics, I guess, over the last couple of months was that the former mayor was considering and laying the groundwork for a potential run for the governor's office. And if she were to win the Democratic nomination and then go on to win the governor's seat, she would become the first Democrat to lead the state of Georgia since 2003. She would become the first black governor of the state of Georgia as well. So there is some history here to her run and her potential successes if she were to go on to win. I think that she is, without a doubt, probably the highest profile Democrat to announce a bid for the governor's seat. Jason Estevez, of course, is also someone who's running, and he has a very good resume as well for Democrats to consider in a primary. But I have to say, and I think most people would agree, that Mayor Bottoms is the higher profile, the better known of the two, at least here in Metro Atlanta. It remains to be seen how much, that the fact that she was a former mayor here, how much that would mean for her outside of the metro area. Obviously, the governor's race is a statewide race, so she would have to attract first Democratic voters in other parts of the state, in the southern parts of the state especially, and then go on and win the Democratic nomination before she could even have thoughts of going on and winning the governor's race. But again, she's in the race, and I think that it'll be very interesting to see how she handles things here, especially when it comes to her mayoral history here. She served one term and then surprised a lot of people, as you know, Tim, by deciding not to run for a second term. She then took a job inside the Biden administration. She was initially considered one of the contenders for a possible running mate for then Vice President Biden when he was running for the presidency. Of course, he went on and chose Kamala Harris, but she did get a boost to her name recognition nationally because she was mentioned as someone on the short list for that. But again, questions as to why she didn't run for a second term, and now questions about her involvement and exposure to President Biden in light of the fact that there are lots of questions now about his not only his physical health with the latest cancer diagnosis. Of course, she wouldn't really have had any insight into that since this happened long after she left the Biden administration. But I think that there will be questions asked to her as far as what she witnessed in terms of someone who worked closely with the president, the former president now, as far as his cognitive abilities in decline. And this is in light of a new book that has just come out that's generating a lot of buzz, saying that there were a lot of Democrats who were in fact aware of Mr. Biden's sort of cognitive decline during his time in the White House and leading up to his announcement that he was going to be running for a second term.
And you're referring to the book that came out this past week, taken the political world by storm. It's really all a lot of national commentators and outlets are talking about, and we're talking about, of course, Original Sin, President Biden's decline, its cover-up, and his disastrous choice to run again. This is by CNN journalist Jake Tapper and also Alex Thompson, who is a White House political correspondent for Axios. It's kind of interesting. This book came out this just past week. I have not had a chance to read it. I know you haven't either. I have ordered it and can't wait to delve into the details. But Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson are really on the receiving end of a lot of criticism for why this topic is only coming out now and why perhaps media outlets didn't cover some of the president's gaffes and things of that nature more during his administration. But really, all of this came to a head on June 27th, 2024, here in Atlanta.
That's right.
When then President Biden and Donald Trump debated here in Atlanta. I was covering that debate. You were too. You were watching. I'm sure we all saw what happened. Take us back to your memories of your reaction during the June 27th, 2024 CNN debate here in Atlanta.
Well, my reaction, I think, was probably like most people's, which was, oh boy, what is going on here? President Biden was asked seemingly very straightforward questions about topics pertaining to his time in office and his announced candidacy for a second term, and he really was just unable to really string ideas and answers together in a way that made any sense at all. I remember at one point there was a shot. The camera showed both former President Trump, now President Trump, and President Biden, now former President Biden. And while President Biden was struggling to answer one of these questions posed to him by Jake Tapper, who was the moderator, co-moderator of that debate and the co-author of the book that we're talking about that just came out, and President Trump turned and looked at his opponent, and I think he too was stunned. It was like, whoa, what's going on here? And then President Trump said, I don't really know what he just said. I don't think he knows what he just said. And that really encapsulated a lot of the feelings that I think a lot of viewers were having, whether you were in favor of President Biden or in favor of then former President Trump. This is the man who is in the White House right now, and he is struggling mightily to answer, pretty straightforward, simple questions. And so that, I think, was it certainly was the beginning of the end of his reelection campaign. And it seemed to me at the time that it was not a matter of if but when he was going to announce that he was going to step aside. And of course, that ended up coming, and not right away, but it ended up coming some weeks after the debate here in Atlanta, when he stepped aside, and then Kamala Harris, the vice president, sort of assumed the role of the nominee without really any kind of a battle amongst other Democrats who might have also been considering a run. She was sort of anointed the new nominee with President Biden's support at the time. And of course, we all know how that worked out for the Democrats.
Well, regardless of anyone's political affiliations, we are all sending our best wishes and hopes to former President Biden, who was announced this week or very recently that he is suffering from a fairly aggressive form of prostate cancer. And we are all, as I said, regardless of political affiliations or beliefs, sending best wishes to the former president. Let's circle back to Keisha Lance Bottoms. She was a one-term Atlanta mayor, the first one-term Atlanta mayor to serve only one term. Apologies for the redundancies. But since Sam Massell in 1972, who was running for re-election against Vice Mayor Maynard Jackson. Maynard Jackson would go on to become Atlanta's first African-American mayor, defeating Sam Massell very handily in 1972. Maynard Jackson would go on to serve 2 consecutive terms and then a third uninterrupted term after 2 terms from Ambassador Andrew Young. Maynard Jackson and Andrew Young obviously played a huge role in securing the 1996 Olympic Games to the city of Atlanta. Keisha Lance Bottoms takes over from her predecessor, Kasim Reed. in the middle of a federal investigation into alleged wrongdoings during Mayor Reed's office. She takes over. She is the leader of the city during the COVID-19 pandemic, oversaw a Super Bowl here in Atlanta, but also had some controversies during her tenure as mayor. Only a few weeks after George Floyd was died in Minneapolis police custody, we had the shooting, police-related shooting and death of Rayshard Brooks in South Atlanta, led to a resignation from Atlanta Police Chief Erica Shields. And then we all know that the very controversial Atlanta Public Safety Training Center was begun under Mayor Bottoms' watch. A lot of controversies during her tenure. What are some of the issues she has to overcome, specifically as regards to her record as a one-term Atlanta mayor?
Well, I think that the question as to why she didn't run for a second term is one that she's going to be asked a lot. And she's already been asked, and she sort of tried to brush it off and say that she does not think that that's going to be a problem for her. But I'm not so sure that that's the case. I think that a lot of Democrats are going to be curious as to why she decided not to run for reelection. Before they're willing to give her their vote in a Democratic primary. I think that Democratic primary voters would want to know that this would be someone who would be willing to step up and serve 2 terms if possible. And so she's going to have to answer that question a little bit more forcefully and I think more convincingly than she has. Again, it's early going here for the Bottoms campaign, at least officially speaking. So she has some time to work on that with her communications strategists. But I think that that's going to be a big issue. I think that that the unrest, the civil unrest that played out here in the streets of Atlanta back in the summer of 2020, something that few people who lived through it will ever forget. It was a harrowing time here in Atlanta for a number of days and nights, and she was in charge. While all of that was happening, for better or worse. If you're in charge, you take the credit when good things happen, and you take the blame when things do not go well. And I think that a lot of people will look back on that period of time and have questions as to whether she could have been more effective and done a better job, perhaps, of trying to tamp down the upset and the unrest that really riled the city and caused so much damage and destruction here to local businesses and institutions. So I think that those probably are the 2 main things. Of course, there was also the cyber attack that took place while she was mayor, and I think that is something that obviously a lot of people are concerned about in this day and age, when we seem to have a lot of these types of attacks happening on a more frequent basis. What would her plan be going forward if that were to happen again while she was in the governor's mansion? But then I think the Biden question is really not something that is unimportant here. What did you know and when did you know it? And if people really read this Jake Tapper book and begin to get behind the idea that there was some type of conspiracy among top Democrats to hide the fact that President Biden was in such a state of decline. As someone who worked in the Biden administration, questionable how senior a role she played, but still she was a part of the administration. She was appointed to a role by the president. She's going to have to answer that question. When you were with President Biden, when you were in his presence, did you not notice any kind of decline? Did you not notice that he was struggling at all? And that, I think, is going to be a question that she will also have to answer in a convincing and forceful way in order to persuade Democratic primary voters here in the state that she is ready for a run for statewide office. So first she has to convince Democrats, and then if she were to make it through and win the nomination, she would then have to go on and convince voters across the state and across party lines that she was someone suitable for the governor's office. And I think that is right now a big question.
Well, her candidacy is already an historic one. To my knowledge, she is the first former Atlanta mayor ever to seek Georgia's governorship. If elected, she would accomplish something that former Democratic state lawmaker Stacey Abrams tried and was unsuccessful in doing in the last two Georgia gubernatorial elections, becoming the first African American female chief executive of a state in U.S. history. But as you said, she has to make it through the primary. We have one other announced Democratic gubernatorial contender, Metro Atlanta State Senator Jason Estevez, hearing some rumors that former DeKalb CEO and former chairman of the DeKalb County Board of Education, Michael Thurman, might be running. That's two confirmed Democrats, a potential third. Jason Carter, we know, has ruled out a gubernatorial run at this time because of family health concerns, as has U.S. Congresswoman Lucy McBath. This is a Democratic Party that seemingly is unable to really field a statewide candidate for a top office outside of the Metro Atlanta region. What are your thoughts as far as how Georgia voters in other parts of the state are going to continue to react to a party that may perhaps be seen as being centrally controlled from the city of Atlanta?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's certainly no surprise when you look at really any state, and certainly any swing state. The major metropolitan areas are where you're going to see the Democratic base. Most Democratic voters are going to be in those areas. And I'm thinking about Pennsylvania, for example, where Philadelphia and Pittsburgh are the two main cities in that state. And if a Democrat can't win in those cities and win by large margins, he or she has no chance of winning statewide. And I think that the same could be said here in Georgia when you take a look at some of the major population areas, of course, here in Metro Atlanta, Savannah, of course, as well, and a few other pockets of the state where there are Democratic votes out there. I think that what former Mayor Bottoms is banking on is that popularity for President Trump is going to drop, that as some of these Trump policies are enacted, the Trump budget that looks like it's getting set to be passed, at least in the House of Representatives, as his agenda is playing out, that his popularity is going to drop, that there's going to be an increased level of people who want to see change. And we are coming up on, this is all it's all happening during a midterm election cycle when the party that's out of power typically does well in a midterm election. So historically speaking, that is. So we'll see. I think that it'll be very interesting. This is a sort of a gamble on the part of Keisha Lance Bottoms and Jason Estevez and anyone else who decides to get into the race as a Democrat to sort of be the anti-Trump candidate, someone who is going to say, look at what the Trump policies are doing. Look at how it's impacting the economy. Look at how it's impacting jobs, and how it's impacting government services that so many people rely on that are now being cut as a result of the Trump agenda. And I think that is going to be her main argument here, is that she would fight against those types of policies on behalf of Georgians and try to get the state back on track. Now, whether that's enough to win statewide, I think that remains to be seen, but I think that's the tack that she's going to take. And I think it's probably the best tact at this point, given that national polling numbers for President Trump are down and could go lower depending on what happens with the economy.
Well, with 2026 right around the corner, we have the potential here in Georgia to have all of the top statewide offices Georgia governor, lieutenant governor perhaps, secretary of state perhaps, attorney general definite, as well as a tough reelection battle ahead for U.S. Senator John Ossoff. All elections that we're going to continue to follow quite diligently here on Atlanta News First and AtlantaNewsFirst.com. This has been Political Update for the week of May 23rd, 2025. I'm Tim Darnell for Rick Foldown. Thanks to all of you for watching and listening. Remembering that you can watch all of Atlanta News First podcast on our YouTube channel and on our Roku channel, and you can listen and download all of our audio version podcast, Behind the Investigation, Decatur Dish, Political Update, and all of our other podcasts from your favorite podcasting platform. Again, for Rick Foldown, I'm Tim Darnell for Political Update here on Atlanta News First and AtlantaNewsFirst.com.